Petty, vengeful, undemocratic. Three words that sum up what the central government is doing to the BBC today. This afternoon, income tax officials turned up at BBC's offices in Delhi and Mumbai. They seized phones and laptops of journalists working there. Now, the IT department says these are surveys and not rates. They say the BBC has been flouting rules on profit and pricing for years now. The opposition says these are revenge raids carried out by the Income Tax Department for the BBC's documentary on Prime Minister Modi. It's not about tax evasion or tax irregularities. It's all about attacking freedom of press, says the opposition. They point to the timing, and they have a point. The raids have come exactly a day after Parliament adjourned. So it was planned to avoid backlash in both houses. Talk about perfect timing and planning. Opposition parties, of course, have ripped into the government for what it calls intimidating tactics and attempt to gag the press. The Congress says they asked for a probe on Adani, but got a raid on the BBC instead. Listen in.
यहाँ हम जेपीसी की मांग कर रहे हैं अडानी के मामले में और वहाँ सरकार बीबीसी के पीछे पड़ी हुई है विनाशकाले विपरीत बुद्धि.
Now, last year, during his Independence Day speech, Prime Minister Modi made a rather bold claim. He called India the mother of democracy. Is this how democracy's mother treats media houses, with threats and raids? We are presiding over the G20 this year, ladies and gentlemen. We are selling our model of democracy to the world right now. But within our borders, the government is raiding one of the biggest media companies in the world. And for what? For a documentary? But let's forget the diplomatic implications for the moment. Let's focus on what the government was trying to do. Like the Home Minister once said, let's understand the chronology. First, the BBC released its documentary on Prime Minister Modi. This was the 17th of January this year. It's called The Modi Question. It's a two-part series. The BBC accused him, that's the Prime Minister, of engineering the Godhra riots of 2002. It also accused him of trying to destroy India's secular fabric as Prime Minister. Now, was this documentary a hit job on the Prime Minister? Maybe, maybe not. I've not seen the documentary. But how did the government respond? It invoked emergency powers under the IT rules to block the documentary on social media, on YouTube and Twitter. It did not ban the documentary. When students tried to organize screenings at their colleges, especially here in the national capital, power supply was cut off. Some students were arrested from campuses as well. So in one word, the government overreacted. Days later, the centre got busy. They had to firefight the Adani report and the parliament chaos over the China border situation. So the BBC issue slipped under the radar. But once parliament adjourned, the government got down to business. The very next day, that is today, these so-called surveys have happened at BBC's offices. Surely this is not a coincidence. No one believes this is a coincidence. This is a loud and clear message to every independent voice and journalist in this country. The moment you start asking questions, either the Income Tax Department will pay a visit, or maybe the Enforcement Directorate or the CBI will come knocking. The idea is to intimidate and threaten you into submission, says the opposition. In this case, the BBC has promised to cooperate with authorities. They are saying they are hopeful that the issue and the situation will resolve as soon as possible. At this point of time, there is nothing more they can say in any case. But the BJP is in absolutely no mood for any resolutions. The party is calling the BBC the most corrupt and nonsensical news company in the world. Listen in.
यहाँ पे कोई भी एजेंसी हो, आईटी हो, इनकम टैक्स डिपार्टमेंट, चाहे जांच एजेंसियां हो, ये वो पिंजरे का तोता नहीं रही हैं जो सर्वोच्च न्यायालय ने कांग्रेस पार्टी की सरकार को फटकार लगाई थी. बीबीसी के अगर कृत्य देखें, जिसके उदाहरण मैं आपके समक्ष अभी पेश करूंगा, तो ये पूरे विश्व की सबसे भ्रष्ट बकवास कॉरपोरेशन हो गई है. और दुख की बात यह है कि बीबीसी का प्रोपेगेंडा और कांग्रेस का एजेंडा एक साथ मेल खाता है.
Before I go to my guest this evening, joining me is Priyanka Chaturvedi, Shiv Sena MP. Priyanka, thank you very much for joining us here. I've seen your tweet. You're saying you're not surprised at all, but the IT department is saying, why are you calling these raids? These are simply surveys. They are saying that these tax evasions have been happening by the BBC for years now. So obviously we will raid them or survey them or whatever.
Absolutely not. What stopped them from acting on BBC for so many years that they speak of? And if they had been seeing some kind of, non-cooperation coming from the BBC as far as accounting is concerned, as far as filing documentation is concerned, what stopped them from asking them and seeking those from BBC? The timing itself is so clear. You ban the documentary, then you go all out and you try and defame the BBC. We may agree, disagree with that documentary. Personally, even I haven't seen the documentary because not that a foreign media channel will show us what happened in 2002 when we are aware of what happened in 2002. But my only feeling is that going overboard, trying to stop something only brings more attention, more focus to this documentary, which has led to these IT raids. And if the country knows, even a child in this country knows how agencies are being misused, whether you look at the IT, ED, CBI, and various other agencies. All I'd like to say here is history will remember their complicity in trying to undermine democracy and constitutional principles and undermine their own role in upholding justice where it was needed to be done.
Priyanka, before I let you go, BBC is, of course, one of the largest media houses in the world. But are the raids today / surveys today sending a larger message to the domestic media in our country as well?
Domestically, we have been seeing repeatedly how media freedom has been crushed. Our rankings show that. And how journalists who are really pursuing the cause of holding the government to account are suppressed, they are called anti-national, they are given various terms, they are demonized, they are also mocked at through using various agencies. IT raids have become the norm. ED opening up files has become the norm. So the domestic media is more or less, except for the independent media, which is through online platforms, we see some activity happen there. Otherwise, more or less, they have pushed them into submission. Now we're seeing the same project being carried forward through international news channels, international news agencies, which I think will obviously attract attention of the global, people globally, trying to understand just how democratic are we in trying to understand, in trying to ensure that we have freedom of speech and expression in this country. So it will bring more focus back to India and how India looks at itself as a democratic nation which talks about freedom of speech.
The Congress is
G20 does raise questions
Priyanka, we leave it there for the moment. Okay, we leave it there for the moment, Priyanka. Thank you very much for joining us. My guest this evening, R.S. Pathania, BJP spokesperson, in an unenviable position today, trying to defend the indefensible. Mr. Pathania, thank you very much for being here. Ashpreet Khadiyal, Congress spokesperson with us. Tehseen Poonawala is a political analyst joining us here in our small little studios at Mirror Now. Thank you very much.
Not read it so far.
Also,
wait so
well,
far.
I mean, I don't have money. even if you tried to rate me, it would be an embarrassment.
But they might just take our phones and go through the data.
अरे data भी क्या होगा phone में? Shikha Mukherjee is a senior journalist, a consulting editor, Fourth Pillar, We the People. Thank you very much for joining us. Who should I start with, Tehseen? Maybe you. What do you make of these raids? Because the government is saying no one is above the law. गलत किया है तो किया है. Tax की bungling की है तो की है. There will be raids. Now you can link it to the documentary if you wish to, but it is what it is.
The problem is that this government behaves like a cat. And you know the cat, when it drinks milk and it shuts its eyes, it believes the world is not watching. Now, somebody is seriously misguiding the most honorable Prime Minister. In the year, he's assumed on behalf of India presidency of G20, as you said in your introduction, where he's gone about telling the world how India is the mother of all democracies. He first goes after, his department first goes after a documentary that none of us would have perhaps watched. We knew what happened. The Prime Minister got a clean sheet from the Supreme Court. Nobody was bothered about it. When they went after it, it became an issue. So somebody misguided him there. Now when this documentary issue is forgotten, they've gone and done this survey. Now you can get in any technical explanation explanation, but the fact is, you know that this happened because of the survey, and this is trying to intimidate people. Let's assume what the government's explanation is correct, that this is only a survey, this is going on from years before, perhaps even from the UPA time. So it's so convenient only when the government is embarrassed in parliament and outside, when speeches are expunged in parliament of the most visible leader in parliament, Rahul Gandhi, and Kharge, the leader of opposition. At that time, the government decides to survey BBC and intimidate people. And I just have a question. The phone thing was not a joke. We were checking people's phones, their personal messages for what? Is the government and the income tax so naive that they believe that journalists who are today working in BBC were involved in share transfer prices when UPA was in power? I mean, why would you look at people's phones? Does that make any sense except for intimidating and seeing that we know what you're doing, we know who you're reporting to, we know what your reports are, and in the mother of democracy, that's stepmotherly treatment.
Mr. Patania, would you want to come in here? Do you really want any one of us to believe that these raids have happened because there has been a tax ghotala by the BBC? Because the simple logic and argument will be, if we go by what the Income Tax Department press release is saying, they're saying this ghapla has been going on for years. If it has been going on for years, why raid them now? You could have raided them 8 years ago, 7 years ago, 6 years ago. It is only a month after this documentary, which the BJP doesn't like, is released on the Prime Minister, is when you decide to go after the BBC. Everyone is seeing what is happening, sir. This is muzzling of the press.
Madam,
People in public life are supposed to have a thick skin, right?
absolutely. That's not the case. That the boot is on the other leg. British Broadcasting Corporation, just like other media houses in India, has all the freedoms, all the rights, and all the privileges. To put it the other way also, all the media houses, including BBC, they are subject to all restrictions, all laws, and all limitations that are prescribed by the Constitution of India, as well as the various laws and legislations in force. So nobody is above law. If you see the press release, they are guilty of transfer pricing rules and unauthorized tax advantages. The right to freedom of speech and expression is not at all an absolute right, right under the Constitution of India. It is subject to reasonable restrictions. So let us see it on merits. My respectful submission that please, we should not try to create a political slugfest over it. We shouldn't cry horse and rather cry wolf over it. My learned friend was saying that, sir, the cat is out of the bag now. Will we not remember that the Congress under the Indira Gandhi, they had banned this British Broadcasting Corporation in India? Will we not believe that this British Broadcasting Corporation at more than a dozen times has misreported issues pertaining to Kashmir and issues pertaining to India also? There are big, BBC might have been, I won't pass a value judgment comment on the credibility and on the reputation of the BBC right here. It might have done a useful service to the realm of press and reporting events in an impartial way, maybe. But the other part of the affair is that BBC has erred on the wrong foot also. It has played on the wrong foot also. And to my dear friends from Congress also, the cat expression, why they are crying like a kilkenny cat over it? My point is, sir, why don't you
But Mr. Patania, you know,
quick answer.
Please. My
Mr. Patania, the fact is, three wrongs don't make a right. If the Congress has banned the BBC twice before, and abhi the government has not banned them, I'm saying three wrongs don't make a right.
That's
People in public positions need to have thick skins. The BJP should just have ignored a very mediocre documentary. Instead, you've given it so much hawa and made it something about personal ego and personal pride. In the end, going to attack the freedom of press as well. Go ahead.
Very quickly to my learned friend from the Bharatiya Janata Party. In 2013, a very wise man who was contesting elections for Prime Minister, he was then the Chief Minister of Gujarat, his name is Shri Narendra Modi ji, I'm sure my vice friend has heard about him, says that the BBC is the most credible organization and other news channels in India should emulate the BBC. Either the Prime Minister did not know that it was a bakwas brushed corporation, or the Prime Minister was misled, which I say the Prime Minister hamare bichare, sir, please, sir, don't interrupt my flow. Sir, don't interrupt my flow. It's a request, sir. आप मन की बात के मेरी काम की बात सुन लो. Flow मत interrupt करो. Please, sir. Request you. So either our most honorable Prime Minister was misled. Thank you for your permission. I thought I needed Shreya's, but thank you for yours. But yes, sir. Either the Prime Minister was misled then, or Thank you, sir. Either the Prime Minister was misled then, or the Prime Minister is being misled now, because in 2013 he said that the BBC is most credible. But as Shreya said, 2 wrongs do not make a right, 3 wrongs do not make a right. So I just want to ask you one question. On this show, you said that the BBC has often taken stands that are perhaps not convenient to India or that have projected India wrongly. In that context, you cannot have an IT survey. The IT survey cannot be because they projected India wrongly. So let's take your assumption that the BBC projected India wrongly. What action did you take? Because you said freedom of speech is not absolute. You didn't take action there and you've had an IT survey. So I don't think the IT survey answers the question what the BBC did right or wrong. That is an illogical answer, sir, with humility.
Shikha Mukherjee, would you want to come in here? The fact is that many people in this country, especially the ones who vote for the BJP, will say, look at the BBC's track record. When the COVID situation was brewing in India, all they did was negative reporting. They could see nothing right going on in this country. Everything they did was negative, and their reporting on India has been fairly negative. They can never see any good in India. That is the point a lot of people who vote for the BJP are making today. Also saying that what's the harm in the raids? If they attack the Prime Minister of this country, do they expect no retaliation? Is this retaliation? Do you see this as retaliation?
I think the world is seeing it as retaliation. Why? I of course think that there is a certain kind of vendetta which is going on. There is a certain kind of vindictiveness about it. But having said that, let me also say that the whole world is saying that this is a retaliation. It's not just journalists like me in India who believe this. The second thing is that why is the Bharatiya Janata Party and its spokespersons linking the income tax issues with spewing venom and then describing the BBC as brushed bakwas corporation? It can be a brushed corporation, but why bakwas? I mean, it would suggest that the income tax raid and the bakwas are part of the same story. In other words, this is a kind of vindictive action against the BBC because it put out that two-part documentary in which Mr. Narendra Modi is not shown in a very good light. Having said that, let me also add that India's record of freedom of speech has been under the scanner for several years now. And that is extremely disturbing because, I mean, what Indira Gandhi did in 1975 to Mark Tully is not a good example to quote, because if that is so, then it would suggest that what Indira Gandhi did in 75 under emergency laws, which was draconian, which the BJP has always been opposed to, has been highly critical of. What they're doing now is also exactly part of the same thing, which tends to confirm the Freedom House assessment that this is an electoral autocracy rather than an electoral democracy. And certainly with G20 presidency in India now, with India now, it is imperative for India. And I'm not talking about any specific ruling party. It is imperative for India to demonstrate that it is a fully functioning democracy where freedom of speech, thought and expression is truly respected and protected, defended. I mean, come on, the Supreme Court also makes comments on the nature of the government's reaction to various issues that have come up regarding freedom of speech. It does indicate that things are going from bad to worse. And if things are going from bad to worse, this overreaction, and this is a serious overreaction, should not have happened. It demeans India.
It shouldn't have happened.
It undermines India's democracy and our reputation as the largest democracy in the world.
Ashpreet Khadial, the BJP today in its press conference, apart from calling the BBC names, is also calling the Congress party names. They're saying, why is the Congress party jumping around if the BBC offices are being raided? Aapko kya matlab hai? Why make this
Well,
political? This is a matter between the BBC and the government of India. There is some tax ghapla they have done. Why is the Congress jumping in and defending the, defending the BBC like it's India's broadcasting corporation?
well, one, I think first, anyone in India, given that we are living in world's largest democracy, is entitled to ask questions. And if the government has a problem with any party, any person asking questions, I think this goes on to suggest in that how troubled our government is and the sad state of affairs that we are having to live in. Answering your second question, that we are defending the BBC, has any leader said that the BBC is innocent or something of that sort? No, we are simply saying that there is a chain of events. The BBC documentary comes, it gets blocked, and after that the IT raids start to happen. Problem here is that there's a big message, very loud, very clear, that if you are not on the same page as us, we will retaliate. If you speak against us, we will retaliate, no matter even if it's the truth. And when this can be done to a media house, a gigantic media house like the BBC, imagine what will happen to the smaller media houses, the smaller ones, not so big ones. It sends a big message. It intimidates them. It instills fears in the minds of those people, those writers, those reporters, those news coverers. What happens to them? It jeopardizes the future of India, not at a small level, at a very, very big level. And number 4, what do you think the Bharatiya Janata Party...
Mr. Pathania?
May I just have 10 seconds to a very important point? See, everybody knows it for a fact that the dots are very, very conspicuous. The BJP knew it, that people will be able to see through it. Nevertheless, they went ahead with it. You know why? Because there is no fear left in the Bharatiya Janata Party. They can do anything and everything that comes to their mind. And there is no accountability left at all whatsoever. And the CJ says that dissent is the safety wall of democracy. The very dissent this Bharatiya Janata Party is trying to kill. So we hope that everybody would come together and make the Bharatiya Janata Party accountable for this.
Okay. Mr. Pathania, let me, what is happening with the BBC is not in isolation. It's not in isolation. Let me just read out the number of media houses which are not exactly, which are not exactly inclined towards the government of India who've been raided. NDTV, June 2017. Quint, 2018. Greater Kashmir, 2020. Newsclick, 2021. Bharat Samachar, 2021. Dainik Bhaskar didn't like the reporting on COVID, 2021 raids. Wire, November 2022. And now the BBC. So this is not happening in isolation.
I think you missed out alt news. Shreya, I think the alt news was also surveyed.
Yes, I missed out alt news as well. Yes, alt news has also been raided. So this is not happening in isolation. This attempt to muzzle the press, gag the press, especially the press that is not doing bhakti, is a trend that started in 2017 and is continuing till now.
No. I disputed with them. With due respect to the London panelists, what they have said before me, this is just, in one sentence, if I have to sum it up, this is just a byproduct of their wishful thinking and immature imagination. This is what, nothing. This is just a volley of charges. And with least substance.
Which media organization will wish for itself to be raided, Mr. Pathania? Which media organization will wish for itself to be raided?
My respectful submission, this is just a matter intricacy between the IT department and the British Broadcasting Corporation. No need to raise such a huge political slugfest. This is what I want to say very, very humbly and Congress and this excessive non-Bharatiya Janata Party government, they have a track record of banning books, banning films, banning documentaries also. So that's not the case. If they have banned, we also have a fundamental right to do so. That's not. I am not justifying. I am just answering your only query. This doesn't give us an untroubled right. Our specific stand remains that this is simply a intricacy issue between the Department of IT and the BBC. It has nothing to do with something.
Okay, Mr. Pathania, but we also know the track record of the agencies. that the number of cases that the ED and CBI are investigating have jumped to great numbers, and most of the people who are being raided are opposition leaders. There is an Indian Express investigation into the numbers. So we know how the agencies are used against political opponents of this government. So please don't give us this jalebi about this being between the IT department and the BBC. ये तो कोई मानने को तैयार नहीं है पठानिया जी.
You know, Shreya, the fact is, Mr. Patania, 1 second, please.
एक मिनट, Mr. Patania, हाँ
please. You know, Shreya, the process is sir, 1 minute, sir, just 10 seconds. The process is the punishment. The government knows the process is the punishment. And the fact is, in the mother of democracy, I may disagree with what you say, but I should defend till death the right for you to say what you want to say. That, unfortunately, is not being fulfilled. And I think, once again, humbly, somebody is misguiding the Honorable Prime Minister. What the Honorable Prime Minister's office has ended up doing, or whoever surrounding him, is got so much more spotlight into this documentary. People who had not heard about this documentary, who had not seen this documentary, people like us who knew what happened, which are don't care.
Misguided?
Because
needed to be sent. The message has been sent with these raids today. But why are you saying misguided?
Because what's going to happen is this documentary is now going to reach every phone, and everyone who's not seen this documentary is going to end up seeing it. So you've tried to ban it from the internet, it's going to reach every phone. You've tried to raid somebody who's made a documentary, people are going to see it. Because when you tell people in a democracy not to do something, they will do it. And now what the Prime Minister did not want being discussed is going to be on everybody's mind. Therefore, I think that the Prime Minister is being misled.
So what is being discussed right now, Tessin, across television channels is how the BBC has been rightly raided.
And therefore,
they are a corrupt, brushed organization.
And therefore, if they are corrupt, if they are brushed, if they are whatever, if they are anti-India, then file FIR on those sections against them. By doing surveys on them proves nothing. By looking into mobiles of journalists proves nothing. Certainly, journalists are not doing the transfer price sharing, right, or price share. They haven't raided where they need to raid. They're expunging speeches in Parliament of Rahul Gandhi and Kharge, and here they're raiding people. This shows that this government is scared. It may say कि मैं एक अकेला सब पे भारी, but I think अब सब लोग उन पे भारी पड़ गए हैं. ये ऐसे लग रहा है.
We'll leave it there for the moment. Mr. Patania, thank you very much. Asking questions is not anti-government or anti-India. I hope you'll agree with me there. It's the press's right. It's a journalist's right to ask questions. Hold a mirror to the powers that be. This is our job. Let us do this job. Don't try and muzzle us. We leave it there for the moment. Mr. Patania, thank you very much for joining us. Ashpreet Khadyal, thank you very much. Tessin, thank you for coming to the studio. And Shika Mukherjee, good to have you on the show as well. I'm slipping into a quick break on the show. There's much more news coming up on the other side. Do stay with us.